Hello everyone, I am Dr. Supriya Manloi from the Department of English of the Bhopal School of Social Sciences. In today's session, we will take a brief look at Virgil's Aeneid, Book 1, lines 1 to 100. Virgil's Aeneid is a long epic poem which was written during the Roman civilization and its evolution. Just as Homer, the great legendary Greek poet, composed Iliad, in that same manner, Virgil composed the Aeneid. In today's session, we are going to look at various aspects of the first book, which is also titled as Storm and Refuge. In today's session, we will first cover the summary of the first 100 lines. We will then look into the wrath of Juno, and then finally we will conclude the session with the various themes of Book 1. As all epic poems begin in medias res, which means in the middle of things, Virgil's Aeneid also begins in medias res, where a group of legendary Trojan heroes who have escaped from the Battle of Troy reach the Mediterranean Sea. It is prophesied that this great fleet of the Trojans will eventually find the nation of Rome. Let us look at Book 1. The title of Book 1 is Storm and Refuge. It begins in medias res, as all epic poems begin, especially the Iliad by Homer. Aeneas, driven by fate, sailed from Troy's shore to Italy, where he founded a city called Latium, the precursor of Rome. There was a prophecy that one day the nation of Rome will be founded by a great warrior who will be a Trojan War hero, a race that will become known to all nations as the Romans. This race of nobles will both be courageous as well as known for their nobility. The poem begins with the famous phrase, Ama Vermacucano, which translates to, I sing of arms and the man. It establishes the theme of the poem at the very start, that it is going to be a poem of heroism, bravery and courage. This phrase sets the tone for an epic poem of heroism and warfare, since Aeneid is a Trojan War hero who has on his shoulders the great prophecy that he will find the great nation of the Romans. Let us look at the brief summary of first 100 lines. Virgil opens the epic poem by declaring his subject, warfare and a man at war. Which warfare is he talking about and who is this man? The man in question is Aeneas, who is fleeing the ruins of his native city Troy, which has been ravaged in war with Achilles and the Greeks. The famous Battle of Troy was very popularly known as the Great Battle in those days. Surviving Trojans embark on a perilous journey to establish a new home in Italy. They reach the Mediterranean Sea. They were destined to go to Africa, but it is Italy which will become the seat of their destiny. However, they must contend with the vindictive Juno. As all epic poems are known for the intervention of gods, Aeneid is also drawn in that same line of clash between mortals and gods. Virgil begins the poem appealing to the muse of epic poetry. Why does Juno, the queen of the gods, harass such a good man? And these lines convey us this idea. Tell me, O muse, the cause wherein thwarted in will or wherefore angered did the queen of heaven drive a man of goodness so wondrous to traverse so many perils, to face so many toils? Can heavenly spirits cherish resentment so dire? These lines imply the fear of the poet. He wants to know that how can such a brave, courageous man be subjected to so much of challenges? What has he done? Why did he anger Juno? Why was Juno so annoyed with him? What lay as a cause over there? Why was Aeneas, such a courageous man, subjected to so many perils? And the answer is given in the subsequent lines. Inflamed yet more, she tossed up the wide main, the Trojan remnant, left by the Greeks and pitiless Achilles, and kept them far from Latium, and many a year they wandered, driven by the fates over all the seas. So vast was the effort to find the Roman race. Juno was angry with Aeneas, and there were several reasons. The entire fleet of Aeneas was thrown topsy-turvy over the waves of the seas. She was pitiless, so was Achilles. She kept them from Latium, which was the city Aeneas was destined to reach. And for several years, Aeneas and his fleet wandered. They were driven by fate over the seas. And in those days, a journey over the seas already was perilous, and to be subjected to such challenges was in itself a very disastrous journey. Juno, the great goddess, was not happy with the ongoing march of Aeneas. There have been several interpretations of Junos Wrath. As stated by Virgil, Juno was angry because Juno loved Carthage, which was her favorite city, and Aeneas' eventual city would destroy Carthage and establish the Roman nation, and therefore Juno was angry with Aeneas. Juno's second reason for her anger was her long-standing or lingering resentment against Paris, who himself was a Trojan and who had not favored Juno in the decision of the golden apple. Juno's another reason for anger was she hated the Trojans because one of their ancestors was Dardanus, the son of Jupiter, and Electra, who was Juno's rival for Jupiter's affection. And finally, Juno was angry because Jupiter made Ganymede, a Trojan prince, the god's cupbearer. So we notice that at the bottom of it, Juno's anger against the Trojans was primarily because in the recent past, the Trojans were responsible for most of the suffering of Juno, whether it was the Trojan prince Ganymede, or it was Dardanus, or it was the Trojan prince Paris, who had not selected Juno as the most fairest of all the goddesses. As a result of this, Juno instigates Aeolus, the god of storm and winds, to raise stormy weather conditions on the sea so that the fleet of Aeneas does not reach the destined shore. Juno commands Aeolus. Seeing the Trojans set sail for Italy, Juno commands Aeolus, the god of the winds, to raise a storm that will capsize their ships and drown them all. Aeolus obeys her. Many of the ships appear to be lost at sea. And to be lost at sea in those days was the end of the journey for the sailors. And Aeneas was embarking on his destiny to find the new nation. These perils and challenges were not going to thwart his efforts. However, when one god intervenes, another god is there to check his efforts. So we have an intervention of Neptune. Neptune, the god of sea, is infuriated. He is infuriated majorly because Aeolus is the god of thunder. So how can the god of storm and thunder interfere in the domains of the god of sea? And although he himself is no friend of the Trojans, he is enraged by Juno's intrusion into his domain. He stills the wind and calms the water, and thus Aeneas is able to continue with his journey. We also notice that the fleet takes shelter in the coast of Africa, and here Aeneas' mother Venus, in the form of a huntress very similar to the goddess Diana, encourages him and recounts to him the story and the history of Carthage. Eventually, Aeneas ventures into the city, and in the temple of Juno, he seeks and gains the favor of Dido, the queen of the city. With this, the book 1 comes to an end, especially the lines 1 to 100. Let us take a look at some of the major highlights of book 1. As we know that all the epic poems start with an invocation, in that same manner, Virgil also begins his Aeneid with the invocation, with the desire to know what made Aeneas face the wrath of Juno. Second, we also come to know from book 1 the great lineage of Aeneas, his very destiny to find the great nation of the Roman people. We also get a peep into the wrath of Juno, and we also come to know that gods who should be known for their, calmness, for their patience, they themselves are driven by mortal human weaknesses, because anger is not an attribute of God, and still Juno is angry. We also notice the anger of Neptune when Aeolus interferes in his domain. And finally, the first 100 lines of book 1 give us a beautiful imagery of the ferocious winds which are let loose by Aeolus at the command of Juno. Two major themes are significant here to mention. First is the primacy of fate. For both gods and mortal, fate always wins in the end. It was Aeneas' destiny to reach Rome, to find Rome, to establish his empire. He succeeds in spite of the fact that Juno was angry and sent perilous journey for him. The second important theme is the suffering of wanderers. The first half of Aeneid tells the story of the Trojans' wanderings as they make their way from Troy to Italy. Ancient culture was oriented towards familial loyalty and geographic origin, and therefore it stressed the idea that a homeland is one source of identity. So both the Trojans as well as Aeneas, who himself is a Trojan War hero, they are driven by homelessness, and this implies instability of both situation and identity. It is a form of suffering in and of itself. And finally, we conclude with some symbolic references. These were the times of major political and social changes in Rome. With the fall of the Republic, many Romans had lost faith and they were severely faltering. However, the new Emperor Augustus Caesar, he begins to institute a new era of prosperity and peace, and therefore Virgil was invited by Augustus Caesar to sing the greatness of the Roman nation, which will be chanted by generations to come. So the Aeneas was seen as reflecting this aim by depicting the heroic Aeneas as a man devoted and loyal to his country and his prominence rather than his own personal gain, just as Augustus Caesar was. Thank you.